Hello, everyone. Hi, I'm Eliza, and I want to thank you all for coming for OGA, First Ever Identity Abroad Workshop. All right, and before we begin, could you?
Got it? I'll do it.
Oh, yes, we're gonna do a short little land acknowledgement. So we recognize that all of us at UW-Tacoma learn, live, and work on and near ancestral homeland of the Coast Salish people. In particular, our campus is situated on the traditional territory of Puyallup. As people on these occupied territories, we have the responsibility to acknowledge the land, the ancestors who cared for this land since long ago, and all our indigenous connections today. We also have the responsibility to acknowledge the histories of dispossession and forced removal that have allowed for the growth and survival of this nation and institution. In light of this history, let us take active efforts to partner with our Indigenous community members and neighbors to seek justice as we continue our work together as community of learners, leaders, and educators. And so this is our agenda for today. So first we're gonna talk about what is identity. And after we think about what is our identity, we're gonna have a little reflection activity that's located in the middle of the table. And while we are doing the little activity, we're gonna also have pizza come in for a little munch and mingle. And while you guys are munching and mingle, our panelists are gonna come and talk about their journey of their study abroad. And then we're also gonna have a little short Q&A afterwards. And then in the end, we're gonna do a little raffle and we're gonna find our lucky winner. All right, I'm gonna pass it off to my coworker Angel.
Okay, thank you, Eliza. All right, to kind of kick off today's workshop, I wanted to set a definition for identity. So, identity refers to our sense of who we are as individuals and as members of social groups. So, some examples of identity include race and ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, first gen status, citizenship, and social class. So again, this is not an exhaustive list of identities. You can also be more than one of these identities. And this is largely where the complexity of identity arises. It comes across in these sort of intersections and overlapping of these identities. So for example, I myself identify as Indo-Fijian. My mom and dad were born in Fiji, and my mom and dad were born in Fiji, and my grandparents were also from Fiji, and then several generations back as well. So while I present as Indian, I have a very hard time with that identity as it kind of dismisses my family's history in Fiji. So I use Indo-Fijian as a way to remain true to my ancestors' history, but then also to myself as well. Next slide. Sorry. No. That's okay. Thank you. Now for the kind of main reason why y'all are here is for identity abroad. So each of us carry a unique identity, right? Those intersections of those examples I had sort of used before. For many of us, that identity has altered the way that we navigate the world. Your identity may be something that's always on your mind, or it may be something that you've just never thought about before. As you interact with people all over the world, so for many of you who are about to embark on a lovely journey, people's perceptions of your identity may be different than how you perceive yourself. So here I have a couple of questions for you just to kind of consider and to contemplate, especially as we move into our activity. How will people in your host country perceive your identity? What kinds of stereotypes may be present? What is the dominant identity in your host country? Does it align with your identity? These questions also work the other way as well. You can ask yourself these questions whenever you interact with another person in your host country. So for example, what kinds of stereotypes do you hold about the people in your host country? A quick story that I would like to share with all of you folks is from my time when I was studying abroad. So I studied abroad in 2019. I went to Bangalore, India. And just before I studied abroad, I stopped over in Thailand. So in Thailand, we were walking in a park, and I was walking with my peers, one of who identified as a white man, and the other who identified as a Korean woman. So we were walking in this park, and then this European couple saw us in the distance, and they got very excited. They got very excited because they saw a tall white man next to us. And they were like, wow, he kind of looks like us. Let's go up to him. And so the European couple approaches us, and they ask us where we're from. And so my friend Brian, he says that he was from the United States. Jenna, who was the other individual, says that she's from Korea, but she was studying at the UW as an international student. And then it came to me and they asked me where I was from. And I said, oh yeah, I'm from the US. I grew up in the same town as Brian. Him and I grew up like 10 minutes away from each other. And the European couple just kind of looked at me and went, no, no. And I was just like, yeah, I'm from the U.S. I'm an American. That's what I identify. They're like, but you're not really an American, right? Like you're from India, right? That's how that works. And I remember being so jarred and like taken back by this couple and not really knowing how to process what they were saying, because especially as I went abroad for one of the first times in my life, my identity as an American became kind of close to me. It was the only sort of semblance of home that I had, and it was what I could really say I am. And I remember also being taken back by this sort of where are you from question. I had thought going abroad this question wouldn't exist, but it still existed, and it still very much carried the same sort of connotations that it does here in the US. So I don't know, it's a very strange sort of intersection of my citizenship, my sort of identity as an American, and then how it's sort of perceived by others abroad. It was a very strange experience, but I like to tell it because it's a little bit funny. It's a little bit funny, it's a little bit interesting, and it just sort of had me double down a little bit more on what it means for me to be me and my life as an Indo-Fijian American, as complicated as that is. But yes, I'll hand it off now to my colleague, Courtney.
Let's give Angel a round of applause, please. Angel and the two other colleagues that I work with, Eliza and Mila, planned this whole event. Thank you. Okay, y'all, so you have some flowers on your table. Some of you have done this before, but it's a good thing to continue to do because your identity changes. So this power flower is going to help us reflect on our own unique identities, and which are dominant, specifically in the culture of this country. And then we're also going to think about how these identities they won't change, but how the perception of them will change when we're in our host country. So everybody gets a flower, and everybody gets a crayon, please. Hi, Jess, come on in. Will you sign in? Hi, just a second, sorry. Hi. Will you all sign in, please, and then have a seat? Thank you. So everybody gets a crayon. The way this works is, as you'll see, every petal has a kind of identity listed. There's a couple there might be one or two that are empty. That's because, there might be something not listed on here that really resonates with you. Like, for instance, I'm in a phase of my life right now where being a parent is all-consuming, so that would be on my flower. So what you're going to do is, if you want to, add in anything on those extra petals, and then if you notice, there's two rows of petals. There's an inner row and there's an outer row. So the way that we fill this out is we color all of the all of the petals on the inner row first. So by inner row, I mean these ones here. You're going to color all of those. And as you color each one, please think about how you identify, what your sexual orientation is, for instance, what your citizenship status is, for instance. And then once you go through the first inner row of petals, you move to the outer row of petals, and you only color that one in if you are a part of the dominant identity in this cultural context. So for instance, I identify as white, so for the ethnicity, I would color and race both petals, because in this culture, that is dominant. Shall I say that again? Okay, I'm going to say it again.
The inner circle dominant?
No.
Yeah. Color it in if you're dominant.
You're going to color the whole inner circle and all of the inside petals, you're coloring. Doesn't matter if you're dominant or not. As you color each one, so I'll start with age group. I'm coloring age group in, and I'm thinking about how I identify as a 38-year-old person. Then I go through citizenship, and I think about I'm an American citizen. I go through all of the inner petals. Then, once you're done with the inner petals, you go through the outer, and you're only coloring the outer petal that is dominant in this cultural context. So I am an American citizen, that is dominant, that's the privileged category in this country, so I'm coloring the whole thing. So start with the inside row, and then if you have questions, I can help you with the outside row. And then we're going to talk a little bit about this. Does anybody need a crayon? You need a crayon. Got it. Okay, so if you and your table mates are finished with your flower, then now you can start discussing how this flower may change in a new cultural context like South Korea or Bolivia or Italy, which are the places that most of us are preparing to go to. Again, you finish your flower, and you're now shifting from the dominant, the idea of what a dominant identity is in the United States, and you're moving to what that looks like in your host culture. So for instance, I told you before that, or I didn't tell you this, but my sex would be female. What does that look like in France? What does that look like in Bolivia? What does that look like in South Korea? Are there different cultural nuances that make my identity more privileged, more dominant, or more oppressed, for instance? And then I would like y'all to just have a chat at your table. I'm not going to give you any specific questions except for to see how your identity shifts in your host culture. How the dominant identity and the privileges or the oppression that you have based on your identity shift in a new place. And I'm going to stop talking. As we continue to have these discussions, please note that there are several questions on the board if you run out of topics to talk about. So you're welcome to talk about, for instance, as I said, how might the color of your flower wow, that's poorly. How might the color of your flower change in the context of your host culture? And how might you be able to use this as you prepare for thinking about the challenges and the assets that you bring with you to study abroad? If I could get everyone's attention just for a moment, and we're going to do a little bit more dialogue and then eat this pizza. I think the last question is particularly important on the board, so I'd like to make sure that y'all give it a chance, because I think a lot of times when we think about identity, especially in the context of this country, it can feel a little bit negative, maybe, depending on how you identify. And so I want to make sure we're really thinking about the assets that our identities bring to an experience abroad. So for instance, some of you may have heard me say this before, but if you are a person who speaks another language at home, you already have so many language skills that you can take with you. You maybe know how to translate. You might know how to navigate in a culture that's not, that wasn't built for you, for instance. Those are assets. If you already have experience being asked a question, where are you from? And you're asked that question when you're abroad, you probably already have an answer, right? So just thinking through the assets as well as the challenges that this activity makes you think about as you prepare for study abroad. And I'm going to let you all talk for a few more minutes, and then maybe we'll share out. All right, if we could bring our conversations to a halt, please. And I'm wondering if we have anyone feeling particularly interested in sharing, not necessarily the answer to the last question, but anything y'all talked about at your tables. Yeah, Faraj. Hi.
We talked about like learning the language of the place you're going to and how difficult that can be. And Ms. Vanessa over here said that once you're like immersed in the culture, it gets a lot easier. So that's something I'm really looking forward to.
Thank you. And for those of us who maybe don't have experience speaking another language, or we do speak another language, but not the language of the culture we're going to, that can feel daunting. So it's nice to remember to just like chill, right? Or try. Other things that we talked about related to the power flower and our identity? There's 3 other tables full of people. but if we're really not feeling interested, that's okay. This is not a required event, so I'm not going to make anybody say anything. Okay, that's fine. My hope is that you take this with you. If you want to physically take it with you, of course you may, but take a picture, take a mental picture, and use this as a means to reflect on yourself and your identity while you're abroad, because some things might pop up that you did not expect. I know the first time that I lived abroad, I got asked constantly if I was an American. Well, people didn't believe that I was an American for X, Y, and Z reasons. And as a white person, I was ill prepared to be constantly challenged by that question. But that was, I was sitting in privilege. I mean, I wasn't, it was like, oh, you're an American. Actually, it was, because it was a long time ago. But anyways, I was ill prepared for that. But it was something that I wish I would have talked about beforehand. So y'all might be used to some of these experiences, and something might shock you. So I encourage you to just continue to think about these, this infographic and how it could help you journal and reflect while you're abroad. Wow, thank you for coming. Okay, let's take a break. Pizza, munch, and mingle, as Angel calls it. I love that. So let's take like 10, how long? It's 4:30 now, so let's take 10 minutes to get some pizza, and then we'll come back and the panel start. Thanks. All right, if we could make our way back to our seats, please. Before we start with the panel, hi, come on in. Put your name down on the thing. Before we start with the panel, I just want to remind everybody of our schedule. So we're going to do about a 30-minute panel, and Angel is going to lead that. And then we'll have about 10 minutes at the end to do a Q&A. And before that Q&A, I'm just going to make sure we go over our discussion rules, because I forgot to do that at the beginning. That's my fault. And then we'll be done. So if there's more pizza, y'all are welcome to get your pizza as we all chat.
Okay. Oh my God. It's amazing how, like, as you know, like, you think the nerves would end at some point. They really don't. They just kind of keep going, which is really nice. But anyway, so I would like to thank our panelists today for joining us. It is an absolute and immense privilege to be able to hear all of your stories today. So just to start off our panel, I'll just kind of go down the line. Can everyone please introduce themselves with their name, pronouns, along with where and when they studied abroad? So I guess we'll start. You want to start with Brooklyn and we'll work our way back?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you, Brooklyn.
Hey y'all, my name is Brooklyn. I use they, them, theirs pronouns. I studied in Cusco, Peru last summer, and I was there for 6 weeks.
Hello, my name is Marta. My pronouns are she, her, and I studied abroad in the Prague, Czech Republic program, summer quarter, so last summer, 2022, and I was there for about 2 weeks.
I'm Nicole Jordan, they, she pronouns. Trinidad and Tobago, it's in the Caribbean, the last island 7 miles from Venezuela, and I was there for 6 months in 2014.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Pleasure.
I would like to ask you all, what made you all interested in studying abroad? And we can always, we'll start with Brooklyn and we'll always work our way down. Is that fair? We'll do that. We'll change the order.
I was interested in studying abroad because I come from a pretty poor family, and it seemed like one of those prestigious things that only really smart rich people got to do. And so I was interested in studying abroad because it seemed totally out of scope for somebody like me. And I was also interested in studying Spanish. So when I found out about financial aid, I actually got interested in studying abroad as a reality. Yeah.
So I think for me, what made me interested in study abroad was that I, one, had never been abroad before, and by the time that this program had come around, I knew that I was interested because it was a psychology program, and I was a psychology major, And it helped also that I knew a few people that had applied and gotten accepted into the program, so it made me feel more comfortable to apply to the program, and it made me feel really motivated to want to study abroad.
So my undergrad was really promoting study abroad. They were like, we're going to all 7 continents. And so it's like a huge deal at my school. And I was like, I got to figure out how to do it. And just like you, Brooklyn was like, I don't know how I'm going to pay for it. Someone going to pay for it other than me. So my uncle did. And financial aid, I applied to scholarships every year. And the way that the semester program worked was that your whole tuition was applied to that program. So I didn't have to, it wasn't like a special month-long thing that I had to pay extra for. It was like considered financial aid eligible and all that. So it was possible. Trinidad and Tobago, why? Because it's a black-ass country, excuse me, black and brown country. It's beautiful. I had never been to one before. I had done trips, just like we've driven to Florida, so I've like been to all black spaces, but never a predominantly black country, and it was life changing. I was at the university taking classes, so it didn't matter what major we were in. I was able to take relevant classes for my degree, social work, and it was an English speaking country. I did not have the capacity to learn another language, so I was like, where are they going to speak English? That's warm and where people look like me, because yeah, I went to a PWI, predominantly white institution.
Wonderful, you guys. I know a lot of what you, especially what like Marta has said, and I guess Brooklyn, and I think all of you guys had touched on, it was a big reason why I studied abroad as well. I had never been abroad before. Getting on the plane to India, I think was the second time I had ever been on a plane. The first time I went, it was like a month before we went to California to go see a family member, and we came back within like a day. And so being abroad for a really, like 5 weeks, I was abroad for about 5 weeks. That was a jarring opportunity that I had never thought because of like my family's financial situation. I didn't think that was a thing that was possible, but yes, but so many of you in this room are in that same place. The next question I have for you guys is, were there specific barriers or challenges that you faced abroad relating to your identity? If so, how did they impact your time abroad? And I guess we'll start with Brooklyn.
I guess I have to get really serious about answering these questions. Yeah, definitely like as like a white queer and like also a gender weirdo, that was a real learning curve, right? Because in Peru, the language is definitely gendered. Spanish is such a gendered language. So to like go into a country where not just like the people are defined by gender, but the objects are gendered, and to even just wrap my mind around that before going was such a barrier, because I wasn't sure if I was ready to be like that brave. Gender is something that's so fragile here, and like that part of like identity isn't even really cared for in these spaces necessarily. And so to go and be in such a vulnerable position where even where just like something as fundamental as the language is gendered was definitely something that felt like a barrier. And it's also a deeply like colonized country, so there's a lot of religious overtones, and so how to be queer in a place where it is dominated by a pretty strict religion was pretty intimidating. And so even those were things that felt like barriers before even getting to that country. Just my identity contradicts and is a bit taboo in those places. And then like you add that I am like tall and white, and like things get weird. So yeah, those were things that like I thought about both before going abroad and then also very much encountered while abroad. And sometimes there were barriers and sometimes there were opportunities. But
I think for me, challenges were probably the language barrier. The Czech Republic is, they speak Czech over there, and there is English, but it's sort of a bit of both. So me as knowing predominantly English and Spanish. There was a language barrier at times. And there's also a bit of discrimination, I think, a little bit of like racist undertones, I'd say. Like you were saying, undertones is a good word. Um, Kind of like what Brooklyn was saying. You know, when our identities are not the dominant in the country we go to, my identity referring to me as sort of a Latina woman, you know, having darker skin than my European counterparts. And so I feel like that was a barrier for me. I'd say that was probably my biggest barrier.
Thanks for the question. Lots of barriers. Um, Four came to mind as the most prominent: colorism, racism, fat phobia, and homophobia. My brother was actually attacked, and well, not, he was assaulted in the streets for being like holding hands with another male person, and I was still closeted at the time, so it was interesting to navigate, like supporting him. 'Cause uniquely, we got to study abroad together, which never happens. But it was, yeah, life changing. Um, the racism was similar to ours, like the seeing black people as lazy because they didn't have as much infrastructure and wealth as the Indian population, which had to do with the policies that were in place, right? So you have to look at the historical context of who was allowed to purchase land and who was allowed to build on that land and wasn't evicted from that land. And so there's legacies to this, but it's still coded like, oh, crazy, or there's lots of skin bleaching creams, and everybody on the billboards was light skinned. So even though I was in a black and brown country, they were still valuing white supremacy. And religious, that's interesting. It's complicated. They have a lot of religions that are present because of the blending of the multiple cultures, and they were all aligned against queerness, though. Like none of them were like, "Yay, queers!" So that was super hard. And um, yeah, I think how they impact my time abroad. I found a way to like fiercely love my blackness and my queerness that in a way that was interconnected. I learned that there's so many different ways to be black, and like, and we can have all these million types of religions. That wasn't something that I grew up with. It was pretty much one way, the right way. Just kidding. That's not how I feel. And yeah, it was opening eye opening in that I was able to imagine new ways of life outside of my labor and how that benefits the world, but like who I get to be and how I get to explore and experience life and experience joy, and centering joy as a value is something that I learned in studying abroad.
Wonderful. Thank you guys. Again, I know for me, myself, that was, I'm sorry, I've become part of this panel now, but I'm just supposed to be moderating, but I can't help but share. Um, yeah, a big reason I had also chosen India was I wanted to be in a predominantly brown country, but colorism, that is this absolute huge component of it that I didn't really anticipate, that even being surrounded by brown people, I was somehow still not white enough. And it was just, again, a very jarring aspect that I had not thought about. And it becomes very, again, these aspects of your identity that have always sort of been there become ever so more present when you're sort of put into a new place and then forced to even think about it from this other perspective now. And it's always, it's very, yes, I very much resonate with every bit that you guys have mentioned. But the next kind of question I had for all of you guys was, and Courtney had touched a little bit on this as well, was a major thing that we discussed in our office is using the tools that you already have to help you navigate while abroad. So, for example, some students are already used to navigating a system that wasn't designed for them, and they have ways to cope. So, those skills sometimes translate to skills abroad as well. And so, for my panelists, I wanted to ask you, what skills did you bring to your study abroad? And how did these skills compare to the skills other students brought with them?
Yeah, so I am not only like just the identities that I've shared, but something that I found to be unique in my cohort of study abroad students was that I'm older than a lot of them. So, I mean, I was at least a decade older than all of the other students that I studied abroad with. With the exception of one other person. So there was a pretty big age gap that was already happening, and one of the great things about being older is that you just have more experience in how to be adaptable. And so, like, I have traveled before, and I have just had to be adaptable to make it this far, like, to survive the circumstances of my existence. And so that is like a skill that I brought was adaptability. And some of that came with age and some of that came with social class. And though that wasn't necessarily something that someone could say, wow, you are just going to walk into any situation and be able to be adaptable. But through some of that back experience, I was able to like be comfortable in situations just because I have a relationship to adaptability. I also have like a pretty strong community, whether that's like in the trans and queer community or in academia. Community is not something that is new to me. And so I got to like have those relationships as a skill, not only as a skill, but like in my life, but as a way to connect with other people. And for some people who are just studying abroad or just leaving their families for the first time, maybe they don't have like the same relationship to community, but I have a really strong relationship to community. And community building. And so that's something that I felt like I was able to do and like a skill set that I could bring that not everybody like had that. And yeah, it just helped me to like think about what I was doing there and why I was there and to kind of keep it in context. And that also feels like a skill, like just being able to keep things in context and not get too bogged down with whether it's the isolation of identity or like for me, like being misgendered day in and day out, like not getting locked into those kind of like patterns, but to use my skill sets and use my resources from the past to kind of like dig out of that, and especially when it was like scary or harmful or sad. And yeah, so that like connection to community and interest in identity was something that I didn't share with everybody. But to be honest, it was like way less practical. Some people went to Peru actually knowing how to like speak Spanish, which I did not. So even though I did have these great things and things that I felt like I added to the collective pool of resources and skills, it felt like they were a bit more like abstract and esoteric than just like how do you get in a taxi and tell somebody where you want to go in that language. That's all.
I think for me, some coping mechanisms that I had, you know, being of this tanner skin tone that I am and growing up like in a Mexican and Salvadorian household, I think like knowing how to deal with instances of racism and prejudice and knowing like, okay, when an event happens, like how do you move on from that? It helped a lot that like I was able to talk with my peers from my classmates that I studied abroad with. My roommate Mila, and just like I was able to contact my family back home and sort of keep in touch with them. And so having that interpersonal communication skill of talking things through or journaling and and like contacting my family back home helped me sort of navigate. So those were the skills that I brought, knowing what to do and how to do it, how to navigate those experiences, and also just having like coping mechanisms like journaling, listening to music, and also searching for a sense of home while I was abroad. Having things that reminded me of home. As I said, like listening to music was something that I did as well.
Music is a life changer. I definitely had an iPod that I just finished downloading everything, and that's how old it was. Um, just finished uploading all the songs, and then took it to the airport, and then I left my laptop with my all of my immigration documents and my not my passport, thankfully, but my iPod, and my everything else was returned but my iPod. So I did miss out on some music that I had wanted to bring with me. But I went to the dollar store and they have these like wall sticky things. You can have like a little inspirational quote that changed my life. It just made the space so much more warm. I like had little things that I hung up on the and had pictures that I took with me that a friend drew me. And they sent me care packages, which was nice. I was gone for a long time, so I had to definitely pack some things with me. But other than the physical things, I'm very creative. I sing. I'm a writer. I'm curious. I'm a leader, and very intentional friend and sister. I can cook, so that really helped because they were not trying to give us a stipend that we can actually live and thrive off of. They gave the students that went to the black country the least amount of money than they gave versus what they gave to the European students, and they tried to say that it was because of the way that the money. Anyway, I won't go into that. We didn't get a lot of resources. And so being able to cook and learn new recipes from the community members, we stayed in like this dorm style, maybe like a hostel style thing, because there's a central kitchen and everybody had their own individual room with a tiny sink. I don't know why we needed a sink in our rooms, but we did. That was important for you to know as well. So how do these compare? I definitely hosted potlucks and like family dinners for the whole squad. I was like the mom friend when we went out exploring, an advisor and counselor to my detriment. Um, I always ask really reflection. Um, I ask a lot of reflection questions, and so I was often like a facilitator of like one-on-one time and check-ins for my cohort. Um, and I took classes that were interesting and challenged me personally. So I got to learn from a black professor for the first time, and yeah, I think that the creativity, the intentionality really allowed me to build community, not only with my cohort of travelers, but also the people we were living and staying with that also went to the university or were just community members.
Alrighty, lovely, lovely. I know the note Brooklyn had mentioned about community. That was a very big skill that I think I unfortunately kind of left behind. I had forgotten a little bit about my community and the support network that I did have at home. I became so sort of withdrawn in myself during my study abroad that I kind of forgot to reach out. And so, I don't know, that brought back a nice little, well, it was a nice memory. It was a thing I wish I could have done, but a thing I can now spread on to the knowledge and joy to you all. The other question I have for you all is I just want you all to please share a story from your study abroad experience which demonstrates a change in perspective about yourself or your host country, or that demonstrates personal growth.
Yeah, I've got one for you. I've already told this one to Courtney, but uh, so when I was in Peru, it was the winter solstice, so it got dark really early, like 4:30 p.m. I mean, we were there on winter solstice, and my host family, who I really adored and they really adored me, would say things to me like, we just really don't want you to walk home at nighttime. And I would say, okay, that's a fair request. But then they elaborated and they would say, you're just such a beautiful Barbie girl. We don't want you to walk home because you're so beautiful that someone's gonna get you. Which is like so kind and caring. But if somebody said that to me here, I would probably yell at them. Not really, maybe. But to hear it from my host family was really hard because they were trying it. They were doing it lovingly and out of care, but it felt like not only did they kind of like want to like feel like I needed to be limited to be safe, like in my activities. It was like because of this weird gender thing, which it was also like really hard to not respond to and react to, and not just to be like, wow, you do not see me at all. And like the way that I tried to grow from that was to not react or not say like, let's have this conversation about gender, or like how that's just like that sexism is gonna like limit my kind of mobility and freedom here. But it was an opportunity and an invitation to have a conversation with them to say like, hey, I would really love it if you could see like me, like see the qualities and traits of me, like outside of being this beautiful Barbie girl. But can you see me as like a strong, competent person? And can you like can we have a conversation about how you're looking at like me for me and not just the kind of ways that we're socialized to think about people and what they're allowed to do and when they're allowed to do them, and how that is tied to oftentimes race, gender, sex, like all of these things. And so it was just like a growth moment for me to not just say like, can you not do that? And to instead say, wow, how do we enter into this conversation where we're talking about something outside of kind of identity, and like the parameters of identity, and more about who we are as people and who I am as a person, and to just invite them to really see me, and to be able to really name like the things that like make me feel safe to walk at night at 4:30 p.m. in another country, but just actually talk about it. So that was something that happened multiple times until we really were actually able to talk about it and address it in a way that wasn't rooted in identity, but was very much rooted in selfhood.
I would say I have something similar to say, just like Brooklyn. Like, my story is about being out in public, and so basically how this experience happened. I was with a few of my classmates in a grocery store, and we were just grabbing baskets, because we were going to shop. And then there was this like older man. He sort of pushed me out of the way from all like the baskets, and it just was. I was sort of shocked, and like he pushed me and like mumbled something under his breath, and I was sort of. I felt like in that moment it was sort of prejudiced because of the way that I looked, because there was other shopping baskets that I was not in the way of, and so that experience kind of really rocked me. Like, I sort of was scared to be anywhere. I was scared to be alone out in public, or not close to by any of my classmates. I was sort of just kind of unsure of how to go about my day, and so I was initially scared to be out and about alone or away from my classmates. And there was just one day where I kind of was like no, I don't want to like live in this fear, and like I want to like enjoy the opportunity that I have here. And so one day I woke up, and it was like 5 a.m. and I like the days, were getting shorter to like when my time abroad was ending. So I decided to go out and explore before the day started, before our activity for the day. I took the tram to Charles Bridge, which is like this really famous bridge over there, and I watched the sunrise. It was around 5:30 a.m. And then I traveled a little bit for a couple hours to see a bunch of different like monuments and like places I wanted to sightsee. And then I stopped by for a croissant, coffee, and then I went back to the apartments where we were staying. And then I was like, well, that was my early morning, and I kind of did it all by myself. And I was really scared too. Like, I was like asking my classmates, like, does anybody want to go with me? Like, does anybody? But then I decided, oh, maybe this is something I need to do on my own. And so then I went out, did my little travel, and then I came back. And that's kind of what I kind of grew from that. I grew because I just learned that I really love traveling, and gaining independence is what I got from that.
Yeah, so I don't know if y'all are familiar with Carnival. Yeah, it's awesome. Well, the day before Carnival in Trinidad and Tobago, they do Juve. Juve, with Trinidad's emancipation in 1834, these celebrations evolved into Juve, which is literally translated as the dawning of the new day. Rooted in this celebration of freedom from slavery, Juve has become an expression of rebirth and joy throughout the Caribbean and abroad. So it's like the first day of the whole series of days. And then what happens, you wake up at like 3 in the morning and you go downtown and then to like the city circle, and there's different band camps just like in the carnival. And then but at the end of it you're throwing mud or paint or something at people, and you just end the day colorful and just like dancing and joyful, and maybe you had some drinks, so you might be a little giddy. So it was a beautiful day that just kind of showed me that blackness is joyful, and that it's a source of joy, and that it is not my problem, but that racism is my problem, and that I do not have to own that. I don't have to carry that in my body. I can carry the pride and the joy that blackness gives. So, yeah.
I wonder for you guys, did your time abroad change how you viewed your identity? If so, how?
Not necessarily like my own identity. I wasn't like, oh, I'm not queer. Oh, I'm not like a gender weirdo anymore. Or like, it didn't really change, like, it didn't shake my foundation in that way. But I did like actually gain some appreciation for coming like back to the US and appreciating, like, even though it's pretty painstaking here and there's still so much violence that surrounds gender, like there's actually a lot of like good things that are happening here, whether it is community or whether it is some of like the ways that we talk about gender. That I think I had previously just said like that's too slow, that's too incremental, it's not enough. And now I have like more renewed kind of like appreciation for my own identity versus like a change. It's more just appreciation. And yeah, it was such a like practice of self-care to have it be so like uncomfortable and controversial that when I got to like come back and be like, oh, that was just like a new way of learning to care for my identity.
So I think my time abroad changed how I viewed my identity in a positive way, um, because I felt like I grew to learn to love my identity. Because of that experience that I had, I sort of was conflicted about my identity, and I think growing up like with a darker skin tone, I've always sort of had a sort of a love-hate relationship with like how I perceive myself, and I think now I feel like I know that people might view me differently because of the way that I look, but in thinking that, I also think of the people that care about me, or appreciate who I am, friends and family. And my identity became more salient to me, and I grew to understand my identity as a Mexican Salvadorian woman is a big part of me, and I don't want to let that go. And I feel like it's with me everywhere I go. Like I'm always, and I'm learning to love, my identity and just sort of keep it with me and know that like nobody can take that away from me.
Thanks. So, yeah, I was closeted at the time, so I was definitely starting to explore my queerness, and I slowed down and learned to, but most importantly, I slowed down and learned to see myself and experience myself as a journey, not simply on my way to a life goal or just made living my goal, which was a complete like shift in me being an overachiever and trying to be highly capable and the first one to go to college, first one to get my master's. But it just, I get to experience this and I get to breathe in it and sit in it and like be proud of where I've come from and also where I'm going without always thinking about what I can produce.
Thank you, guys. I know when I had come back from my study abroad, there was nothing quite like this. I would also like to say I studied abroad through a different institution. I went through UW Seattle. So UW Seattle is a whole nother beast in and of itself, and UW Tacoma is much better. Please, that's recorded. So just hearing your guys' stories today, and then also just I guess seeing how study abroad maybe didn't always change it, or maybe did change it, or helped you appreciate your identity is, I don't know, it's a really big thing. I know, because again, even for myself and hopefully for all of you guys, it's, I don't know, nice to see what's on the other side after you study abroad. I have a couple of last questions for you guys. I think we have just enough time for both of them. Yes, well, yes, yes, we have time. We'll have time. We'll see. We'll see what happens. So the one of the last questions I have for all of you is, in what ways does your study abroad still impact your life today?
I'm so excited to answer this. I pursue and have been offered job opportunities and volunteer opportunities both to do translation work for different immigration advocacy centers, which is why I went into studying Spanish, is because I didn't say all of this, but my degree was in law and policy, and I'm pretty sure I want to go into immigration law, and part of immigration law is being able to speak Spanish. It's an important part of it, which is why, despite the disconnect between law and policy and a Spanish language program, the bridge is pretty clear. So like last week, I had an interview with the Kitsap Immigration Advocacy Center, which is my closest kind of like network. I just interviewed with them for an opportunity to do support in their legal sector, to do some like translation work essentially. And so that's like pretty big that the education that I got from studying abroad has led directly to opportunities to work not only with nonprofits and organizations that are doing the work that I want to see happen in the world, but that they say, wow, you have the skills to be able to help us and to help other people. And that is like one of the best things. And similarly, when I got back, the professor that oversaw the program, Augie, he reached out as soon as we got back saying like, hey, the Tacoma Pro Bono Center is asked me for people who are interested in working in their legal sector to do translation work. Like, is this something that you would be interested in? So those are two opportunities that all of a sudden I became eligible for because I studied abroad and studied Spanish abroad. And those are just such important opportunities. And I don't think that I would feel as confident. Definitely would not have felt as confident if I was just relying on the education that I tried to get through Spanish classes versus like the Spanish that I learned while studying abroad. So yeah, it's such a game changer as far as like doing real work that I want to be doing, and now being much more confident in actually being able to do that.
So I think for me, how does study abroad still impact my life today? Um, I think about it now like that experience was a positive experience, and I think back, not only did I like make friends from that experience, it also informed my love of traveling. So before I didn't really travel a lot, just to various states, but never abroad. And so I think this informed my love of traveling. I really love traveling now, and I would like to travel more in the future. And it also gives me hope that with traveling can come new experiences and growth. And I think also study abroad impacted my life because I was able to gain independence and confidence, not only in my own identity, but also with navigating traveling and independence that comes with that.
In what ways does study abroad still impact my life today? Well, I've been back to the country, the Twin Island Republic, 4 times since then, and it inspired me so much that I one day dream of starting a study abroad program to the Caribbean for UW Tacoma. We're just gonna speak that into existence. Um, and continue to practice valuing joy on and unapologetic and unbound expressions of blackness, queerness, and womanhood, as expansive as that is. And yeah, I'll let you ask the last question.
Alrighty, thank you, Nicole. If you do start a study abroad program, I'm gonna like super senior it and like stay. um, I have one last question for you guys, but before that, I am gonna pass it off to my coworker Mila, who's gonna try to see if our lovely audience has questions. Maybe, or maybe they've all become silent. Whose mic do I take? You can take. I'll let you take that one.
Okay, well, before we start with questions, I just want to say thank you so much to our panelists. I am so thankful and grateful to hear from your experiences, and they're very valuable. And I just know students that who may not have marginalized identities or who haven't considered their identities strongly when going abroad will learn from your experiences. So thank you. I'm very grateful that you shared your experiences. One big round of applause. Okay, so now if you have any questions for the panelists, I would like to take student questions first. Any questions? You got a question? Yes, okay, you got a question.
Okay. So I was just curious, you guys talked a lot about like the bigger revelations and epiphanies you guys had regarding like bigger things. I was just wondering about like the day-to-day life there and how, you guys woke up and were there sorry, was there like a plan every single day? I know like school's related to it. Oh, really? Okay. I was just wondering. Thank you.
So maybe like, what was your daily life? Yeah. And if it was scheduled?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they want to know about the Tacoma programs. So let you answer.
Yeah, I think that my program was different than your program because it was longer. We had like structured days, Monday through Friday. We went to a Peruvian university, like a Spanish speaking school, Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1. And then after that, nothing was scheduled. And it was very unstructured time. And weekends were all unstructured. There was one weekend where we went to Machu Picchu where we had an itinerary. But for the most part, we would wake up, and my experience was a little bit different. I didn't have a roommate, and I was the only student that didn't have a roommate in the UW study abroad program. And so I got to like wake up and just walk to school and eat breakfast with my host family and then go to school. And then honestly, it really depended on who you made friends with. Like, were you more of an independent person? Were you hanging out with a group? Were you having lunch with people? And it was very, very free flow for the better half of the day and then all the weekends.
So for my program, it was it was like a hybrid program. So we did classes here on campus, June and July. We were in the classroom once a week, and it was 2 classes that were on the same day, like back to back. Well, with the lunch break in between. So then we did that for 2 months, and then we went abroad. So during our time abroad, we had a planned an event every single day, with exception of a couple days there wasn't anything scheduled. But how it worked was that we had an activity in the early morning, afternoon, and then in the evening sort of is when we had our free time to just go grocery shopping or hang out with each other, go to dinner. So that's how it was structured. So we had something during the day, either a food tour or a visiting, various museums. We didn't attend a university. It was sort of like experiential experience, like experiencing through museums, food tours, things like that. And so that's how it was structured.
We can talk later.
Do we have any more questions from students?
So I'm kind of wondering if you guys had any struggles or experiences with like getting along with the people that you are abroad with, like your fellow students. Because I'm going to be doing a program with the Seattle campus, and I'm kind of like, I don't know how I'm going to relate to these people so much a little bit. So I wonder if you have any thoughts or tips on that.
Yes. It was a very colorful group. There was one person in particular who was really anti, and they didn't want to engage in the community or do anything that would challenge them outside of what was mandated by the program. And so it was difficult to relate and connect with them because they didn't want to leave their room. Um, how we navigated that, we let them have their space and didn't expect that kind of community from them. And so I think it's a negotiation of how much you share about yourself and choosing to be vulnerable in ways that you can make meaningful connections. And then if it doesn't work, like not like trying to make it work, like you don't have to be best friends with everybody that you go with, but you just have to be respectful and kind. So if you can maintain like respect and kindness, then the issues can take care of themselves if you learn how to apologize, full like respond, take accountability, and like listen, like those kind of basic things. But I think that the trickiest part was there were so many moments I'm like thinking of now, like roommate disputes. We had different not vacations, but like excursions, or we had different setups. So that was always fun. But I would say that you're all are nervous and you're all probably terrified and really excited, and like so sharing those hopes and fears, like, hey, what do we want out of this experience? What are we concerned about, and how can I show up for you, and how can you show up for me? And just making that the start of the conversation in the relationship so that you know how to continue to relate and to change those dynamics as you go on. But if it's open communication, it'll be easier. Does that help? Okay.
Yeah, also just enter with curiosity. Like there's so many things that people wanted to do that I was like, I would never want to do that. No, I do not want to go do that weird thing. But I totally said yes. I said yes to doing so many weird things, just like purely out of curiosity and like connecting with other people. And some of those things were incredible and so goofy. And like that level of vulnerability in being curious about what other people are into was super worth it. And so even if it feels like, wow, I am not interested in whatever, just I like highly recommend tapping into your own curiosity, because then other people will tap into your curiosity, and then you're actually working with people and like you're working with connection instead of independence. And so like if you feel stuck or other people feel stuck, like just think about how to be curious and be curious about yourself, but also be curious about other people.
Yeah, I would say if you can get like everybody's contact information or have some sort of group chat, I feel like that was really helpful for me. And just, asking people, like not being afraid to ask, like, hey, does anybody want to go to this restaurant? Or, does anybody want to study together or something like that? So I think that would definitely be a good piece of advice that I would give.
Any more questions from students? Where? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm like blind. I can't see you.
Thank you. Did you guys feel like safe at all times? Or did you ever have like moments where you're like, I don't know if I should go out right now? Or feel like, I don't know, did it always feel like a safe trip to you in your opinion?
I'm happy to start. The answer is yes, But there is a caveat to that. Which is that I have done a lot of weird, dangerous things in my life, not studying abroad. So I am not a particularly shakeable person in that way anyway. So I don't think that I have the best answer. But yes, in general, I always felt safe. I felt like there was a lot of preparation through the program itself, but also just like the place itself, like Cusco felt safe to me, the school felt safe to me. It all felt very, very safe. But I feel that way a lot of the time. So
I would say for me, I think it felt safe. I think the group that I went with, everybody was super supportive, and like we would always go to like to dinner or to like all the events. We'd always be in a group most of the time, and I feel like everybody was willing to have each other's backs and like keep each other safe. And I think Prague was a very safe country. I think in as long as I wasn't alone, I felt safe. And even when I grew to be okay with being alone, I felt safe. So I think it felt safe for me overall.
No. And there's ways that you can work around those fears. So we learned how to not just look like obvious tourists, so that we wouldn't be target to any kind of harassment or anything. And sorry, my eyes here. And we so But once you learn how to get around, and I'm so grateful I had an English speaking country because I was able to take maxis and taxis and like go from north end of the country to the south end of the country. I didn't do any of those excursions alone personally. Other people in my group did. I was really raised to be really fearful. I grew up the street, Hilltop, Tacoma, Washington, so I wasn't even allowed to go outside a lot of the time growing up. So I personally didn't always feel safe, and I know that other people did, and protecting yourself, walking with purpose, having a zipped bag, having knowing where you're going, um, or being confident when you're asking for directions um, helps, and once you start the routine of going to the market, going to the store, going to the movies, people will see you as a part of the community as well, and so they'll treat you with like warmness and welcomeness. So like I didn't, but at the same time, my brother, right, was assaulted for holding hands with another man. So it depends on where you were. That was on campus, so it wasn't like we were like in the hills or something. But yeah, there's always going to be places where there's more harm because there's more challenges there. People are hungry, and so they're going to find ways to eat. And yeah, I think, but I didn't personally encounter too many obstacles or scary things on my trip.
If I could just add something, thank you all. I think safety is very dependent on how you identify and where you are, and it's very subjective. So I want to keep in mind that in this country, I don't always feel safe, but I live here and I am a white person. So I think what I want to just leave with y'all today is this is going to sound a little salesy, sorry. At UW, all study abroad programs have to be carefully vetted by many different organizations. So we're not going to send somebody to, for instance, right now, we wouldn't be sending someone to, Ukraine, for instance. However, what we are asking our faculty and students to do is, as Nicole said, think about where you are, be cognizant of the culture that you're living in, try to respect the local, rules, and in that, we hope that you do feel safe because other people are living there, are doing those things, and they are also feeling safe. But I'm really glad you asked that question, and I appreciate y'all's answers. And we went over, and I'm so sorry. We need to do our raffle. Are you ready?
Yes, we're gonna do our raffle for.
Before we do that, can we give another round of applause? Wow.
Just do it right here. Do it right there. Right here. Drum roll. Okay, guys, it's okay. You don't have to do it anymore. Melissa Martinez. Yay, congrats. Yippee. Okay,
Can I just say one last thing?
Oh yeah, sure, go ahead.
I just have one piece of advice that I don't want to leave. I want to say. So invest in yourself by building healthy relationships, whether you choose to maintain them or simply treasure them in the end. It'll be the best choice you make.
I want to encourage those of you that need to leave to please, don't stick around. There's tons of pizza. Please take the pizza. I know some of our panelists have things to do, and that's absolutely fine. Some of our panelists have stated that they're able to stay. So if that's the case, awesome. Angel, were there ways to get in contact with these individuals? I think they were on the slide, right? Y'all, we didn't think anyone was coming today. We're so grateful for you being here. This is such a valuable conversation, so we hope that this is just the starting point and that you can come to our office anytime and chat with us. And I'm forever jealous that you're all studying abroad. So thank you for coming. And thanks to the student employees who did such an amazing job. Angel, Milla, and Eliza, thank you.